All of us who have been affected by the quantum effect, conspiracy theories, and current state of affairs have individually gone through our own awakening process. For some people, the act of waking up to what's really going on in our world has been pleasant and has filled an empty place in their hearts. For some, they decide to focus on day-to-day and ignore what they feel they have no control over. For the majority of us affected, at least the majority that I've come across in the truth community, they experience their personal waking up in a very different way. The moment that we found that one specific effect or detail that resonated for us individually, a great sense of mental dissonance happened. The definition of dissonance and why it's important here. The term cognitive dissonance is used to describe the feelings of discomfort that result from holding two conflicting beliefs at once. When there is an inconsistency between beliefs and action, something must change in order to eliminate or reduce dissonance. Dissonance will be resolved in one of three basic ways. 1. Change beliefs. Perhaps the simplest way to resolve dissonance between actions and beliefs is simply to change your beliefs. We see this in a couple of ways. People who really accept the new belief or information as true cause the dissonance to reside. At the same time, those we see denying the belief causes dissonance to subside by not recognizing the new information. 2. Change your actions. A second option would be to make sure that you never do this action again. We see this in those who choose to disregard the information they have come across completely and refuse to look into it any further. And 3. Change your perceptions of the action. The fastest way to get dissonance to subside is not to accept the new action at all. To convince oneself from the get-go that the information is completely false and the effects are an error message in other people immediately removes any dissonance for a person. Those of us who really see ourselves as the affected have most often taken the path of number 1, acceptance. But true acceptance is a hard thing to come by, and you really can't fake out your brain by pretending to accept a situation. This only leads to disassociation. When most of us believers struggle with the effect, it's because we have not fully learned to accept that all the things we are seeing can really be happening. Until full acceptance is made, we still fall between levels of dissonance, and perhaps for some, a full level of acceptance can never be reached. That's called being human. I see lots of people revel in the beauty that is truth. What they see is a rise in consciousness of both the world and humanity. But I see even more people who are suddenly feeling very alone in their intake of new information. Suddenly, there's no one on your level to talk with. You're experiencing a life-changing input of information, and those around you do not even want to converse about it. All of this information is real and good, but it isn't what I really want to express in this video. I want this video to shed light on the similar processes that people all over the world are experiencing right now. I want this video, like always, to help those feeling alone to understand that they are not. Whether the people around you accept the information that you have become aware of, whether your husband is tired of talking about it, whether your parents, sisters, brothers, or spouses are writing anything you've spent good, solid time studying in detail off as just being crazy, you and your experiences are really and truly not just in your head. It's easy to tell somebody first experiencing the effect that they are wrong, because truthfully, deep down, many people hope at first that this crazy information being presented to them is wrong. There seems to be some common belief that those experiencing the effect, or uncommon information as a whole, believe what they believe because they hope it's that way, but it just isn't true. Many of the affected go into their course of studies hoping that the details that do not correlate with the world as they know it are wrong. It creates bad feelings, dissonant feelings, to believe that every single thing about the reality that we've experienced all our lives is wrong. It's against the nature of human brain to want to believe something that means their entire lifetime of knowledge could be untrue. To have to be uncomfortable with our past paths in life is not something that one naturally wants. But when it comes down to it, there comes a point where denying new information is nothing short of ridiculous itself. For example, if somebody tells you about a UFO, you might believe, but chances are you'd be shocked anyway if you saw one. Once you have seen one, there isn't a soul in the world that can tell you they don't exist. Well, they can, you just aren't going to care. And this is how the effect started for me. I've always been a quite spiritual person, but I believe in staying present. I've been through some very dark things in my life and spent the last 10 years healing from these traumas and developing a strong ability to stay present. After years of professional instruction to deal with PTSD, abuse, depression, and anxiety in the healthiest ways possible, I really have become very emotionally stable. I dug UFO stories and paranormal accounts, but I was never into conspiracy theories. Personally, I had little interest in them overall, and I believe that no matter what was happening, I had little control over it anyway. and I should just probably focus on day to day and stay fully present. I didn't want the effect to be real. It didn't make a bit of sense to believe these theories. It's easy to say that there's no proof of things when you haven't really looked into or observed any of the proof on your own. And if you did, it was most often with pre-prejudice anyway. In the summer of 2016, I received a Facebook tag from my sister. It was for an article simply stating, "Is the Berenstain Bears proof of a parallel reality?" I began studying quantum physics on my own in 2007. I was always interested in the quantum theories coming into the scientific forefront, so it made every lick of sense that she would tag me in this. So I checked out the article. My first response, it was fairly standard. I asked a few people what they remembered, as I clearly remembered Stein, and I found it fascinating, but of course believed it was a memory discrepancy. I did notice right away that over half the people I was asking seemed very put out by the question, and more annoyed when they remembered it as Stein as well. My husband called his mom and asked her to pull out the old books that we had, and she herself was shocked. Next, we asked his sister. She's very left-sided, really lives her life by what others think of her, and immediately remembered it as Stain, which she very vehemently maintained while we were talking to her. She immediately acted like we were ridiculous, her mom included, although we had done nothing except ask her what she remembered. This behavior in itself became a focus of fascination for me. Why would people respond so aggressively to such an innocent question? I started looking into the effect further, past the realms of online pop culture. I became obsessed with people's behavior around this topic. I researched almost 24 hours a day for 2 weeks straight, these mental reactions, possible causes in psychiatry, and so on. I was doing okay, talking with my husband, following little changes, movie lines, and so on. I was still doing okay, still confident in my world, still sure there was a very common reason for all of these false memories. And then I found Tiananmen Square and the JFK assassination footage in the same day. And I knew this was much larger than common misspellings or assumptions. Because when I watched that video footage of Tank Boy climbing on top of that tank, whilst a crowd of people were cheering for him, and the bloody death I'd watched in the past never followed, well, I had seen a UFO. And then I saw it again. I hit play on the JFK assassination. I want to specify that I'm no kid. I'm 40, and I've watched this assassination more times throughout my schooling than I can tell you. And the first thing I noticed, it was in color. That, and there were 2 extra human beings in the car, in a portion of the car that had never existed in my history of viewing it before. But maybe the most important part, I watched this video footage without knowing beforehand that it was a Mandela effect at all. And when I saw the details of the assassination had changed, I literally thought I was losing my mind. And so I went and I looked it up, and lo and behold, it was on the Mandela effect list. And supposedly, it has always been that way. This new footage is graphic, in color, and you can see the angle clearly he was shot from. You see a portion of the skull lift off. You see Jackie leaning over in front of him. You see everything in color, and it is most certainly footage that you would know if you had seen before. I picked out the Mandela effect details in the video on my own, without ever knowing that this was an effect. And when I went to check it out, and realized that others had noticed the exact same changes I had, without ever talking to them first. That was my first true experience with this sort of dissonance. My head buzzed, literally rang as I drove to work to pick up my husband at 10 p.m. And when I reached the empty parking lot of his building, I had tears welling in my eyes, and a repeating thought, something along the lines of, "I want to go home, I don't know where I am anymore." My brain literally shut down. It was unable to process anymore that night. I shared both pieces of footage with my husband, who sat there in his own state of shock. And then we drove to 7-Eleven, bought some alcohol, and I drank myself silly for the next week. Everything in my life had changed at that moment. The moment I knew something was going on that I didn't have an answer for, and I knew that this was going to be an awakening I couldn't wake up from. After about 4 days of complete dissonance, I began to pull myself together. Really, I think it was my brain had time to sit and start convincing itself again that none of this was real, and it was just some sort of psychological reaction. Wanting an answer, I resumed my research. I began where it made most sense to me, the parallel worlds theories and quantum mechanics. I knew that there had to be scientific thought experiments as early as Schrödinger's cat that dealt with the formation of reality and our experience of it. I looked into particle acceleration, I looked into the goals of the LHC and CERN, and I came across this happy video with its direct shoutouts to the effect before it was an effect. And I looked into quantum computing, the D-wave, and the direction it was trying to go with alternative dimensions, and it all started to make sense to me. At this point, holding much of the conversation to deduce facts and observations with others was out of the question. For most people around me, these topics were boring, or beyond their level of knowledge about such sciences, or worse, just existential. Every time I would try, people would look at me like I was crazy, based almost solely on their inability to believe that any of the science even existed. To those around me, practical science was just science fiction, and they were happy with that level of understanding. I, however, was not. I was lonely, and I continued to study everything I could on psychological experimentation, quantum discoveries, political agendas, and the so far discovered nature of reality, or what most people would just think of as Newton physics. I had started chatting here and there with people in comment sections about what they were personally experiencing. And I noticed 3 things right away. 1, most people had the same experience that I did with odd reactions from simple and unled questioning. 2, most people were feeling very much alone in the physical vicinity around them, unable to converse with anybody they actually knew in real time. And 3, most people were experiencing changes in real time, not distant past memories. And then, that happened to me as well. I was shopping with a friend, and I put an item in a handbasket, with her watching me, took a few steps, looked down, and the item had disappeared in thin air. She was horrified. I experienced another shock of dissonance. We went home, and I attempted to explain the effect theory to her. We spoke straight 6 hours about it, and she was extremely interested and had me show her tons of information. She left that evening with plans to look it up. 2 days later, a lack of memory of any of this. This happened to me multiple times, and I gave up explaining anything to anyone when something strange would happen, as I was quite aware that they never remember talking about it with me later anyway. It was sort of a dead end with people. It was just so far outside the idea of their reality. You could see the dissonance kick in, the excuses for how it all had to be wrong, or false, and later a refusal to even visit the topic again. I began an email group for other people experiencing the same situation through comment sections of websites like YouTube. We became a tight-knit group quickly, so relieved to have anyone willing to talk to about this. I started conducting polls on what potential commonalities were between those of us who saw and accepted changes and those who didn't. I was receiving information from real people who did not want to believe what they were seeing and experiencing. I was interested in the more human aspect of what we were all going through. I wanted to understand what it meant for us, not just what details had changed. An old movie quote was something that could be misremembered or persuaded in mass. Seeing 2 trees on your street disappear one day and show up again 2 days later when there were other people with you, that isn't faulty memory. That was something else, and given the state of cognitive dissonance, this makes every bit of sense. But it doesn't help us get anywhere. My husband's personal reaction is to say, it doesn't matter. I'll never know the answer anyway. I believe the opposite. Every answer we have, at some point, we didn't. All answers are there to find. You just have to learn to ask the right questions. So I started a YouTube channel to share these things with my small mailing group. The entire time I figured on maybe 15 people from groups subscribing to share information. 4 weeks later, my subs hit 1,000, and I really began to understand that we are out here, and we really are not alone. Shortly after, I started the official Jynxeffect support group for the affected, and throughout my studies into this phenomenon, these members have been my guiding light. This once dissonance-creating phenomenon has led me to meet the most supportive, kind, generous group of people that I have ever had the privilege of knowing, and we have helped support each other through every aspect of life. I love my support group. We're made of Muslims, Jews, Christians, Buddhists, and atheists. We are Black, White, Latino, and Native, Asian, and mixed. We are both old and young, 20 and 70, with children and without. We are men, we are women, we are transgendered, we are professionals, and we are the disabled. And we are all here for each other. There are still experiences I have daily that cause a rush of dissonance, but so far, the best thing for me that has come from this effect is the other affected. We can't prove anything. We're not in the business of being responsible for doing that. If you need proof, it's there. It's going to take you actual time and actual effort to find it and take it in, which most people are just unwilling to do. But for those of us who have really done that work, who continue to question what we think, what we know, we are the ones that will bring our future into being. We are the ones seeking answers for our children. We are not crazy, and we are not alone.
I've been carrying your pebbles for so long on my back, but they're becoming